Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. There is a lot happening. Something
Big stuff.
crazy occurred, which is Democrats actually decided they might do a few
Shocking.
things.
Took 2 years.
Yeah, it took 2 years, but we've got a potential Manchin deal. We've got CHIPS Act to boost semiconductor production here in the U.S., passing the Senate. We have the Biden administration making some moves on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, things that we had actually been talking about on the show,
For
both
months.
with analysts and with Ro Khanna.
Yes.
So very, very interesting things to break down there. We also have new indications that the Department of Justice is actively investigating the president for any crimes committed related to January 6th. So we will break all of that down there. And the, possibility that he could be indicted is larger than it was in the past. We've got Jordan Sheridan on the show. He's, of course, a great partner of Breaking Points, and he has been on the road talking to business owners and regular families about inflation and its impact on their lives. So he's got some great footage there. Samantha Bee's late night show is no more. I know you guys are devastated. We're going to walk you through that. It's going to be okay, folks. I promise you, we are going to get through this together. But first, before we jump into our first story, our announcements.
2 announcements. Okay, you guys already know I'm going to start with live show. Let's put this up there on the screen. We're selling tickets. We're going at a very fast rate, and we're going to sell out very soon. So please go ahead and purchase your tickets. It's going to be linked down there in the description. Atlanta is first, as we said. If you buy tickets to that one, really helps us in the future, but we are still also coming across the country. Second, the promo of our monthly subscribers being able to upgrade to yearly is ending on August 1st. So the link is there in the description. As we said, it helps for financial planning purposes. We've got some interesting things that we're working on right now. And to all of those who did upgrade to yearly, I want you to know that it is solely because of you that we are able to do some expansion investments that we're considering right now, which is very, very helpful. So thank you all very, very much. But let's get to the show.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so a big bombshell report from the Washington Post, Carol Leonnig and others breaking this story. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. This is the first time we have officially learned that the Justice Department is investigating Trump's actions in January 6th criminal probe. They say people familiar with the probe said investigators are examining the former president's conversations and this is also new, have seized phone records of top aides. Let me read you a little bit of this article. The Justice Department is investigating his actions, according to 4 people familiar with the matter. They're questioning witnesses before a grand jury, including 2 top aides to Vice President Mike Pence. The sorts of questions that they're asking those top aides also significant. They've been asked in recent days about conversations with Trump, with his lawyers and others in his inner circle who sought to substitute Trump allies for certified electors from states Joe Biden won, according to 2 people familiar with the matter. They have asked hours of detailed questions about meetings Trump led in December 2020 and January 2021. They've also asked about his pressure campaign on Pence to overturn the election and what instructions Trump gave his lawyers and advisors about fake electors and sending electors back to the states. Some of the questions focus directly on the extent of Trump's involvement in the fake elector effort led by his outside lawyers, including John Eastman and Rudy Giuliani. The things that are new here is the degree of prosecutors' interest in Trump's actions that had not previously been reported. They also had not reported the review of senior Trump aides' phone records, including Mark Meadows, who was chief of staff and was really the sort of hub at the center of all of the, insanity that they were trying to perpetrate on the country during that time. So the fact that they have Meadows' phone records is a very new and significant development, Saagar.
Yeah, it is interesting. And reading this, and I mean, the real question is, and people are always saying, oh, January 6th. Actually, this isn't actually focused on any of Trump's actions really on January 6th that day. They really are more focused on the fake electors plot in order to replace them, and to the extent that the president was involved. So there are 2 possible options criminally, and this is very suspect according to some people that I asked, was first is seditious conspiracy and conspiracy to obstruct a government proceeding. So those are the charges that were filed against both Stuart Rhodes and Enrique Tarrio, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. The issue with that is, as we've spoken about, it is so incredibly difficult to prove seditious conspiracy in a court of law. It has not been convicted by the Justice Department in decades in a U.S. court.
So even, and we went over in detail the indictments of both the Oath Keepers leader and the Proud Boys leader. And, you know, they have phone records there and text messages being exchanged of, hey, we're going to, you know, be at the Capitol and let's bring weapons and let's show up with tactical gear. I mean, they had elaborate plans there. And even those cases, analysts say are going to be very difficult to prove. The thing with seditious conspiracy, which is kind of the, like, you know, the big get, if, you know, in terms of the furthest reaching charge you could possibly get here, you have to have, you have to show intent to overthrow the government using violence or force. So you would have to have something super direct. Trump plotting with the Proud Boys to have some sort of armed attack on the Capitol. And based on what's in the public record now, very unlikely that they meet that standard in terms of seditious conspiracy.
The second one is about fraud associated with the false elector scheme or pressure that Trump and his allies put on the Justice Department to falsely claim the election was rigged and that votes were fraudulently cast. This also is, frankly, I think is another case of just like during Russiagate, where they definitely would have colluded if they could have, I think, you know, if they could have easily done it. And yet in this particular one, because so many DOJ officials resigned and no actual fraud or whatever was actually done by Bail Barr or any of the associate attorney generals who had resigned, that they might, again, this is from what I've spoken to, in a criminal having to actually prove that they associated this. Having the intent to do something is not the same as actually doing something. And so with that, again, it is relatively suspect. So anyway, I'm just telling you what I have asked around for criminal statutes.
Let me elaborate on this too, because I also did some digging on this. So the big issue with the charge of defrauding the U.S. government, I think is the technical charge there, is that this would be a relatively novel application of this law. So it hasn't been used in quite this way. And prosecutors get very squeamish about using laws in ways they haven't really been used before. And I think that goes doubly so when you're talking about the United States, the president of the United States.
This would also easily go to the Supreme Court if it was a novel use.
That is all very true. So for that is, I think, the primary reason why they may be reluctant to go forward with that charge of defrauding the U.S. government. More likely, if they were going to charge Trump, and I continue to be skeptical that they will. You'll remember under the Bush administration, I mean, George W. Bush committed crimes, could very much have been indicted, and Pelosi and the rest of the Democrats said it's time to move forward. So I continue to be skeptical that Merrick Garland actually has the stones to indict the former president of the United States. But the probably most likely charge would be obstructing an official government proceeding. We've seen others who are involved in January 6th charged with that. The bar with that is still continues to be difficult. And frankly, based on what's in the public record, I'm not sure that they meet the standard here because you need intent. Now, there probably is enough of meetings where Trump is told that you lost and this is all foolish what you're doing. There's enough on the record to establish sort of like corrupt intent. In terms of whether he committed an act, because that's the other piece, it gets kind of dicey because on the one hand, you have him sending out tweets. It's going to be wild. You have him tweeting about Pence. You have him giving a speech saying, let's go to the Capitol. But you can also argue that that is political speech, protected political speech. And so these things become very difficult to separate. Now, the Justice Department knows things that we don't know, right? I mean, they've seized Mark Meadows' phone records. They're talking to Mike Pence's aides. Those aides also testified in front of the January 6th committee. So they may have something that more clearly establishes an act than what we have in the public record. That charge, though, I mean, I'm just being honest with you guys, it also is going to be difficult to prove based on what we know thus far. The last one that they could potentially look at, which if they had the facts might be actually more clear-cut, is witness tampering. January 6th committee, Liz Cheney in particular sort of put up these texts that were being received by witnesses. It was kind of a tantalizing bit of information. But again, you would need to prove that this was coming directly from Trump with the intent of either blocking them from testifying or getting them to lie in their testimony. So again, what's on the public record, we don't have that yet. But if they had access to those facts, those would in some way be the sort of most clear-cut and most most easily understood.
Absolutely right. And you know what we're doing here? Responsibly telling you the details of this. And I'm really starting to get some Mueller vibes. I don't know about you, Krystal, which is that so-and-so is investigating. It's okay, well, people investigate a lot. And then it's like we just broke down all the charges and we're like, listen, you know, I spoke with criminal attorneys and you did research as well. From what we can see, it is an extraordinarily high bar of proof on your normal American citizen, not to mention the President of the United States. Now, Merrick Garland is also in a tough spot because the resistance liberals have been banging at his door for 2 years now, being like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So let's put this up there on the screen. NBC News, they scored an interview with him where they said that the Justice Department probe is the, quote, most wide-ranging investigation in its history. And he also made comments on this, on whether he would specifically look at President Trump ahead of the news breaking in this interview with Lester Holt. Let's take a listen to that.
We intend to hold anyone who was criminally responsible for the events surrounding January 6th, for any attempt to interfere with the lawful transfer of power from one administration to another, accountable. That's what we do. We don't pay any attention to other issues with respect to that.
So if Donald Trump were to become a candidate for president again, that would not change your schedule or how you move forward or don't move forward?
Say again that we will hold accountable anyone who was criminally responsible for attempting to interfere with the legitimate, lawful transfer of power from one administration to the next.
You read of that what you will. I mean, once again, I'm with you, Krystal. I just find it incredibly hard to believe for a variety of reasons. Beyond, number one, you don't want to bring a case that you can't win. The only thing more disastrous than charging a former president politically is charging him and then he wins. I mean, can you imagine what that would look like from a criminal point or from a political point of view? And I think that's the way. You cannot take politics out of any of this, which is that there is a reason why many presidents have not been charged in the past, the desire to, quote, move on. And it certainly would ratchet up political tensions here. Nobody is generally going to be focused on the exact specific facts of the case. It would look like a political persecution, and it could certainly push things in a very bad direction domestically. I'm not saying look, if you're a Democrat, you're like, what do you mean we're not just going to equally apply the law? I mean, look, we have an imperial presidency. Like, whenever they are president, they generally can't be charged or tried with anything, and they're only allowed to be convicted through the political process of impeachment for a reason.
I don't agree with that. I do think, based on what's on the public record now, it is, you don't have a slam dunk case on any of these charges. And I do think if you're going to charge the former president, you better have a pretty airtight case.
I'm with you.
I do, if they have that case, I 100% think that they should indict him. I don't think he should be above the law. I think clearly, whether he technically meets any of these definitions, clearly the spirit of what he was trying to do was steal an election.
Sure.
And I have no issue with trying to hold elites accountable in the same way that, you know, all the low-level people who were showing up on January 6th, they're certainly being charged and indicted. Nobody has any reluctance there.
Yes.
It is a little bit different, too, from past circumstances. And by the way, I thought they should have indicted George W. Bush, so I did not support the Democrats being like, let's just move forward and bygones be bygones, because what happens is then that's the precedent that's set. If they get away with it, then the next president is just going to do the same damn thing, which is exactly the situation that we're facing. But I do also think that this is a little bit of a different circumstance because you have the, active possibility of him being president again.
Yes.
So it's not like you can just say, oh, bygones be bygones, let's move forward. No, you have the active possibility of this dude being back in the office. And so not only is it setting a terrible precedent to let him get away with it scot-free, but, if it's not him, if it's DeSantis, if it's anybody else, they're going to look at this and they're going to say, well, he got away with it. Why shouldn't I?
The only way you get scot-free.
That's why I think if you do have the facts, and again, we don't know what the Department of Justice knows fully. We don't have access to Mark Meadows' phone and text records. If you have that very solid case, I absolutely think that they should indict him. We just don't have those facts on the record.
And I was going to say, that's the thing, is that it comes down to the facts. The reason why I'm just skeptical is that, look, at this point, every goddamn thing on the planet has leaked out of this. I mean, every email that they've sent within the White House, all the phone records. At this point, if the Jan 6 committee has subpoena power, of which they have, and they've, at this point, if they had something something within there that implicated Trump, I think we would have heard about it many months ago. Given that, look, it's possible, but we all remember this story during Mueller, and I really found this out whenever I was kind of doing my reporting at the time, was with Roger Stone. They would say, oh, so-and-so's investigating this, and I'd call her, I'd be like, hey man, like give me, and he would give me his flight record, his, emails, all this stuff. The public record is generally there whenever there's such a high level of scrutiny. So again, it is technically possible that the Department of Justice has something that you or I don't know about.
Yeah.
But at this point, if anything existed in written record, in a recording or something like that, I just generally am inclined to think that to almost 20 months since the date of all of this occurring, that it would be somewhere in the press, some inkling, some reporting somewhere.
Maybe not. I mean, I really am not going to hazard a guess on this one because I could see it going either way. I think you're probably right. It's much more likely he's not indicted. The way that in which it has Mueller vibes to me is what you're saying is these constant, like the walls are closing in
exactly.
and how's he going to get out of this jam and whatever, and then nothing happens. But unlike with Russiagate, there is much more there. So in that way, they're not equivalent. I mean, Russiagate, a lot of the stories were just like complete fantasies or, the server pings and what if he's a Russian agent since 1987 and all this stuff. It was just complete nonsense. Here, there is actually some there. He genuinely wanted to overturn the election, whether he went about it in like a competent or realistic way of pulling that off or not. The events on January 6th were genuinely bad, and he obviously was at the heart of stoking that, instigating it, encouraging it. Once they're there, like delighting in it and really being very hesitant to tell them to go home. So in that way, it's different. But in terms of the Democratic resistance hopes getting up that you're going to have this white knight and the silver bullet and this is going to be the end, I do kind of agree with you that, I'm certainly not getting my hopes up there yet.
Absolutely. Especially after I saw all of blue check, Chris Hayes, look, it's finally happening. I'm like, is it? I'm like, have you guys not had the rug pulled under you? How many times do I have to watch this thing
I'm going to wait.
Yeah.
I want to see what happens before any of us get too far down the road here.
And set expectations by actually going through charges and telling people like this, and this, and here's the barrier of proof on all four. And as what we are now right now, it could happen. We'll see. So anyway, that's the story.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.